But we can do a little update.
There are complications.
Well, timing. They're complicating, taking care, I think.
Yeah.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. But we can do
No emails.
4 o'clock, are we ready? We are.
Yep.
Okay, I'll call this joint meeting of the Select Board and Conservation Commission to order. Start with pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Carrie, have any homework we need to do on something?
No.
Oh, good. Public comment for items not on the agenda. Discussion with Doug Beck from the May of Washington Lane. I think I'll call him. Wonder if he's. You can't, nobody gets lost these days with GPS.
I know.
What are they gonna do when they close 73 down?
You have to go
Is
all
there a
the
way
way.
around?
It's Kenny Woods,
Yeah,
Grayson Road,
Yeah,
there's
Westbrook.
Westbrook.
Well, but if you're down there,
what I'm wondering about is like, what's the restaurant there on Clark Island? I wonder if we can go down to that.
Where is that culvert? Is it?
I don't know,
This
St. George.
Yeah, I don't know where Jones Brook is.
I thought maybe it was that really deep dip.
They came in and asked Terry, they could put the sign up on our property and they put it on Arthur's property. Oh. Did you call it, tell her?
Yeah, she's gonna call him. Yeah, that's his number.
Nice try, lady. I don't have more than one dog.
Is that the only one they put up was right here?
They have one in St. George, something like that.
I think they have one on, don't they have one on 131 too?
They should have one that goes around the corner there.
You're currently out of range of a mobile network.
Well, that's because you're inside this building.
Yeah, I don't have any
And outside.
bars right now either.
She should have Wi-Fi, doesn't it? Well, it says turn on Wi-Fi calling. Yeah. I don't know how to do that. I'll try it. This may take a few months.
Well, what else do we have to do?
Hi, Conservation Commission members. Leslie, would you like an agenda? Jeremy, I guess. I said, hi, Conservation Commission members.
How many members do you guys actually have?
We're a full board, I'm thinking 7 of us,
Yes.
and we have a couple of associates, it's not all, right?
Valerie, I
Associates,
think
yeah.
it was so.
And we're just brimming with talent. Seriously, I mean, there's some real energy there.
Oh, yeah.
It's nice.
I'm hoping we can convince Peter Nickelberg to join us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Who?
He lives around Snow Hill Lane and, he's obviously interested. He has been coming to do the road cleanup and,
they just built. And they were living in Rockland while they were building and they just. But within the last 6 months or so moved here.
well, they've been here a while. I mean, their house, but like their house is covered in solar panel, garage house. They are very dedicated to the environment. And, happy to help.
Where's Maggie? These are the library with Penny. And how's your new dog? Oh, he's like perfect boy. I have a new dog. I remember I lost one a couple months ago, and I don't know what it was, but it was 10. But he says it's Charles, and he's a really good boy. Oh, I mean, a really good boy.
Oh, here it is.
Well, I went to call him and I found him. All right.
Oh, good.
Anybody be able to show you how to lie down? And Doug, you can sit right there. You want me right here? Sure. No, not there. Just slide the chair. No, just slide the chair. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, on TV and everything.
Yeah, so I know Doug because he's our grant manager on the tennis court, basketball court project, which has taken forever. But well, that was, no, well, that's fault mainly. But anyways, I was talking to Doug about that project and I just happened to mention to this possible land purchase. A couple of months ago now. And Doug said, oh geez, before you pull the trigger on it, in terms of actually buying it, let's sit down and talk because I was explaining what was going on and he runs kind of a recreational grants program at the Maine Bureau of Land and Water Conservation, something like that. Yeah. So that's how this all gets set up. So why don't we just take a quick minute to introduce ourselves and who we are and what we are. Start with you.
Leslie Spear, I'm on the Conservation Commission in South Thompson.
Are you related to the guy next to you?
I am.
That's what she said. That's what she said. So, I'm John Spear, Chair of the Select Board.
I'm Jeff Northgraves on the select board.
Sue Snow on the select board. Terry Baines, town administrator.
Henry Spencer on the Conservation Commission.
Catherine Lamb on the Conservation Commission.
And Sandra Wallace, Conservation Commission.
All right, and I'm Doug Beck with the Bureau of Parks and Lands.
Hi.
And in that bureau, I am the supervisor of outdoor recreation. In that capacity, I manage the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the Recreational Trails Program, and the Maine Conservation Corps. Although the director of the Maine Conservation Corps doesn't like it when I say that last part, because she really runs the show. I just keep an eye on things. Given all of that, and so it's almost a one-stop shop for all things outdoor recreation investments and project management and construction. So there's a lot of things that we can do that the grant programs can help communities accomplish. Yeah, we've got a project out here that's taken a little bit of time, but you'll be happy to know that it's not my longest running project. Which actually, I think now the current longest running project that just completed was down in Owl's Head Harbor Park. If you've been down there, is an Land and Water Conservation Fund assisted project that I want to say started in maybe even 2015. So these things all take time. Nothing worthwhile comes easily. So you guys have, and talk with John, and
I'll give you this. Give you a little visual explanation if you want. There's a little bit of background.
and
The red is the town's current land.
Yeah.
Which is about 108 acres. I don't have my numbers.
7-1 is the current park.
7, where are you?
Well, or is that, no, that's probably.
No, 7
Yeah,
is a private house.
Where we are right now.
Yeah.
That's a house?
Yeah.
Right.
All right, but the fire pond is that little pond. And the
Little round thing
tennis
there.
courts are right beyond that.
Yeah.
And the basketball court.
Right.
So the town currently owns everything that's marked in red.
right,
And town meeting has approved us to purchase the Klein property, which consists of 10 acres and 1 acre. You can see there's two Klein properties.
oh, this one here too?
The little one. As well as the Smith property, which comes in 3 parcels. The Klein property, they,
Oh, man.
that's sort of a comes with no restrictions and they want to move quickly and they have a real estate agent involved and we probably are paying. I guess to put it bluntly, there probably is no match value in that property. This, don't know that.
That's why I'm
Don't know
here.
that, right, but the Smith property. The 3 parcels, he has agreed to sell it to us for $55,000. We currently have it assessed at about 200.
50,000.
Huh?
50,000.
50, sorry, 50,000. And we currently have it assessed at about 200,000.
Over
Tax.
a little over 200,000.
Which
Um,
means it's probably about 300,000.
Right. So, so anyways, and that comes with restrictions. He wants it forever wild with the, help me now, with the exception of hunting, snowmobiling,
Hiking trail.
hiking, the maintenance and construction and use of hiking trails. And we haven't finalized it with him, but I mean, I think he probably would be agreeable to things like snowshoeing and cross country. I think that kind of falls on the hiking.
Right,
Let me just insert there. He said forever wild. Because that was sort of his concept and something he'd sort of heard of. But actually, somebody at the informational meeting raised the question of, well, what does forever wild mean?
mhm,
And we checked that out with Annette Nagel, and she said, probably don't really mean that, because forever wild really means you gotta leave it alone. You can't go in there and clear invasives. If you've got a dead diseased tree, you can't take it out. If it's on fire, you may not even be able to go in and deal with that. So I've explained that. Doug, not Doug,
Yeah.
Jeff was in on that email conversation and he said, right, what I want or something like, and we need to get the right words around it, but something like permanent conservation protection.
so the beauty of the Land Water Conservation Fund, which you're already aware of course, because you have an existing project that you're renovating, is that once land water conservation funding touches a parcel of land, that land has to be managed for public outdoor recreation forever. So it's not quite a conservation easement, but it's the equivalent of it. And the protections on that are quite strong, in that if ever there were, let's say, hypothetically 50 years from now. So the other beauty of the Land and Water Conservation Fund protections is that the program is in perpetuity. So
From $1, kind of.
from $1,
Okay.
after land and water money touches that parcel, that's protected forever.
Right.
For public outdoor recreation. And public outdoor recreation is a very wide net. It includes a lot of things.
Can we exclude them?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So what the landowner wants is right in line with a number of projects across the state that have been developed. So it's, it's outdoor recreation. So it's not developing ball fields. It's not putting in more tennis courts or pickleball courts or anything like that. It's not hardscape kind of development. It's trails and recreational access for bird watching and fishing and hunting and foraging or whatever else. And if you ever get snow down here again, snowmobiling and skiing and snowshoeing, or if you wanted ATVs or hiking your mountain bike.
Each
No ATV,
specifically included
that's
ATVs.
fine.
And similar devices, but I do agree with Sonia. I think he kind of picked Forever Wild just because he'd heard it, and
Yeah.
we have not negotiated a final agreement with him. And
Let,
we had some latitude in the town meeting
right.
article, which you have a copy of there, by the way, to work with him.
So I think one of the reasons I'm here, is to explain how you can use the value of this land to leverage a land and water conservation project to develop the parcel for that public, low impact public access. So any land and water project there needs to be parking access, there needs to be trail development, there needs to be amenities. These days, probably having a public restroom facility that is low maintenance is not a bad idea. There's, this, because of your proximity of this site in the community and in this mid-coast part of state of Maine, developing accessible trails are a really good idea. Accessible, for most people means, wheelchair access. But a lot of times that also means paved. And that's not what an accessible trail is. An accessible trail, actually, from here, I'm going to go visit one, which is being developed down in St. George, the 4 Point Trail. It's firm and stable. So the trail is, the minimum width is 3 feet. If you're doing a real minimum development, it's 3 feet with a 5 foot bump out every so often to allow passage. But it's firm and stable and flat. So virtually everybody in the community can use it. And there's a famous trail builder in Vermont who used to be into the kind of Appalachian Trail type of trail construction model. And now he's only building accessible trails because he's come to the realization, and he's not a young gentleman. He's come to the realization that most people in the world like those trails. You can walk side by side with somebody, family group with a stroller can, do it. So really, it's a great resource for everybody in the community. Those trails are not inexpensive to build, which is why, so going back to the beginning, we can use the value of the donated land or, partially donated land to be matched for a land and water conservation grant that can then be used to develop the infrastructure that makes this park accessible. Can it be used for the purchase? Can be used for the purchase. Okay. So land and water is an acquisition and development project. So in this case, what purchase cost you have in, as a minimal, that can be part of and ought to be part of the overall project.
Is it matching or is it?
It's a matching grant, which is why the donation portion is a great is a great part of this project because you already have match. There's built-in match with the generosity of the landowner.
But there's some steps to get there. We need appraisals.
Yes,
That's gonna cost, but Henry's had his hand.
Yeah.
You said you can match the value of the land. Is the value of the land or the amount of money the town actually spent on it?
It's the value of the land. So we're going to get back to John, in that in all of these projects, parcels would have to be appraised at a yellow book level appraisal. The yellow book level appraisal is used in any federal land transaction. Even though the federal government isn't buying the land, the federal government is providing funds through the land and water program for that acquisition. The difference in a yellow book level appraisal is that the appraiser, as part of that protocol, has to look at the property for its highest, best economic use. So generally, a yellow book level appraisal gets you the highest value possible for the use of that land.
Right.
So it'll typically surpasses the local town assessment. So you also have to hire a review appraiser to make sure that the appraiser did the job right. So there's a couple of people involved and a bit of money. Ballpark these days, probably 15 to 20,000 for the appraisals. Each. That would be combined. But it depends.
Well, let's back up. where there's 3 parcels involved here, but I assume once we own it,
You're undervalued. Fine, probably too, I think it's probably a big problem.
yeah, but they want to move fast. Yeah, I mean, that's the other issue here. Clients want to close like yesterday, right? We might be able to work with Jeff. I mean, this is gonna take time.
So, right.
And we got the whole other complicating factor of, you know, we
Well,
were sort of in the works. The plan is to apply for a grant, as you know, once this one's closed out, to fix that tent, to redo one
Right.
tennis court. And you said we could combine
you
that,
can.
which gets it
And you
even more
should.
complicated.
It sounds, we'll take it in small bites.
Well, let me
so
just cut to the chase. So my concern is, and we haven't talked to Jeff about this, I know how long this one took to get through, right? Is he gonna be willing to wait a year?
Doesn't necessarily have to.
Okay,
So,
that's good news.
and we'll have to think about this a little more, but, I would be careful with what I say. The, I'd have to check with the Park Service. So there's, I've kind of waltzed around this with them before. In hypothetically speak, so there's a thing in the program called a waiver of retroactivity. And a waiver of retroactivity makes eligible costs or values that are incurred prior to receipt of a project agreement eligible for the project. But this would be a pre-application waiver. Ordinarily, a waiver is awarded when you already have an application in my office, and the application is been reviewed and approved at the state level, and then has been submitted to the Park Service. And at that point, we would say, you know, this community needs to move on this acquisition. You know, they can't wait for that approval. And under those circumstances, typically a waiver is approved. So this would be a pre-application waiver. And I've never asked the question of how far back they're willing to go. At the very least, in order to pre-position yourselves for such a device, if you can get the Klein, you know, you're gonna buy the Klein property?
Well, we've been.
They're not donating.
They've already,
No, they're not donating, and the town meeting has voted to authorize the select board to purchase it. We have not formally done that, but the Kleins, again, they're anxious. They want to close quickly, and personally, I feel to include them is further complicates this. But anyways.
Well, there's another way to skin that cat. And the other way to skin that cat, especially, how many acres are we talking about?
The Klein is 10 and 1.
And how many acres with Smith?
108.
108, so we're almost 200 acres in Mid-Coast, Maine. In addition to, you've got over 100 acres with the town property, yeah?
Yeah, but I'm not sure.
well, the 200 includes the town.
Right.
108.
No, that's the only number.
You were saying, Klein is 10, Smith is 190,
Smith is 118.
118. So we're at 125, 130,
129.
129 acres.
But there's other stuff on the town property already. I mean, the town.
Right, but it's mostly undeveloped.
Mostly, but we have the town office, we have the salt shed, we have the stump dump.
Yeah, what about the red area?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we have
Yeah.
the town office, the.
And all that's kind of over here, though, right? And then you have, isn't the town garage down here further?
No, not that.
It doesn't go that far down?
No.
So that's like right in here?
Yeah.
Oh. So you kind of have,
So one possibility is to put the back end of the town land in conservation as well, but they have not crossed that bridge.
Yeah, and we haven't asked the town.
And I think we'd have to go back to town meeting.
Yeah, we have to have.
Well, at first, the select board has to decide it's a good idea to ask the town meeting. I don't.
Well,
agree there yet.
I personally don't feel that it's a good idea to ask that we'd all be put in. I mean, you know, but I certainly personally would be calling to some of the rear areas. And actually, the title for this parcel was not really clear. The little upper parcel. Well,
Another aspect of the existing town property is that if parks and trails and stuff do get developed and you end up, I mean, down the road, you end up with a restroom facility and parking space and everything else, that can be done on the existing town land. It doesn't have to go on the land.
exactly.
Well-
Except we wouldn't be able to use their money.
Their grant money to put it on the
back
lot next door.
Unless we designate it as.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing on that land, when you're talking with people, it sounds like there's going to be a bit of a logic discussion about this, and then the value of it starts to come into consideration. This particular area is one of the, I think, possibly the largest unfragmented block of land on the entire peninsula.
So that's where I was going
Right
with
in the middle of it, yeah.
the value of the. I don't know if this is a word, but I'm gonna use it. If I made it up, forgive me. The contiguousness
Yes.
I know what I mean.
okay, of the combined parcels. I think you might want to talk to your local land trust about being the intermediary. Because they could then negotiate the sale, hold the land until you have the grant, and then donate the land to the town. That then could be used for match to facilitate the development of this wonderful 300-acre park.
But
How
Speaking
about-
of coffee,
it sounds dandy, except that that's not what the town meeting authorized. I
Well,
don't
they
know what
authorized to
legal
buy
that-
it.
Maybe that's not a problem.
It sounds very complicated, but I mean, I don't think we could go back to the town and say we're gonna buy it for the same price from another party, but.
Yeah,
But it
Well,
gets,
it doesn't say it really matters what it says.
What
well,
about-
it said we were gonna buy it from Smith and
but
Klein.
it gives us latitude on how we negotiate that.
What, Catherine, you wanted to?
Yes, I mean, we have not spoken about land for May's future, which is another source of funding. And I went to the recent awards that they did and the city of Ellsworth, I mean, they did exactly what we're trying to do here. And it got funded and it was 279 acres. And you know, so
you
we
could
have,
look at town of North Berwick for Boone
yeah,
Big Mountain. That's a LMF land and water combined project.
so.
We have a number of projects across state where land and water and LMF are matching each other.
Because, I mean, one strategy I was thinking about is maybe we can go through land for Maine's futures for the purchase of the land. And, you know, we can duplicate the proposal that they did essentially.
Yep.
And then go to your source of funding to develop it once we have it.
So that's a good segue into my other grant program, which is the recreational trails program.
Well, before you segue, but
Okay.
that kind of screws up the timing on the tennis court piece,
That does
combining those together.
combining,
I think combining is
Well-
complicating.
Well, that was Doug's suggestion that, you know,
I'm all about-
we look at this as a whole recreational.
I leave every meeting with people. Gosh. So it's all about options, and unless you know what all of the options are, it's difficult to make a decision that's in the best interest of the project and the community. So, you know, there's available resources, and how you take advantage of those resources impacts what you can do. So yes, if you apply for LMF funding, you wouldn't need the land and water money, because they also would count the value of the donated portion of the land as match for LMF.
Plus, if we were to pay outright for the client, that would also become part of the matching.
Well, I don't think even LMF is nimble enough to handle the clients if they're like,
Yeah, I mean,
Ready
we
to
have
go.
purchased a sale agreement.
No, this is part of one single project. there happen to be two different properties, but the town project is to acquire both,
Right.
to combine and make that what, you know,
Like we do this without
yes.
eliminating the fine property.
But the problem with the client is, they've already sent us a purchase sale agreement. They want to close in August. I mean,
Nothing's gonna happen.
That-
Then
I think by-
nomenclature considers 2 years of history, so that
Okay.
purchase becomes
And that-
part of a donation.
And
when
that's
the-
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can put that in.
That account for.
All the complications of your application process, the fact that we haven't initiated an
Right.
application or even dreamed of one before this moment.
So there's,
Well, actually, we have dreamed of one, because now we're talking about adding something to it.
Right.
We were gonna, as soon as we finish this project, we were gonna submit another application for the tennis.
But the
Rebuild.
timing,
But now Doug was talking about, but maybe. Thinking this through, maybe we should just do the tennis and wait on this one.
so. If you go LMF and you acquire this land with LMF. Then you can pursue a recreational trails grant to develop the trail and public access infrastructure. Recreational Trails Program can fund in some ways up to $120,000 in trail development costs. Accessible trails are expensive. So, you know, even 120,000 probably isn't enough. That would 120,000. So RTP, Recreational Trails Program, can fund up to 80% of eligible project costs.
and so we need 20%.
You'd only need 20%, and a lot of that can be in kind, donated goods, services, and materials. But it's a lower grant amount. The basic RTP grant is only $50,000. And we'll entertain up to 3 $120,000 grants.
Per project, you mean? What,
That's per annual grant cycle.
Correct, year after year in the
Right.
city. Okay.
So you wouldn't be able to get. RTP is not a great funding source for trails at this scale.
Right.
If you already have the trails in place, it'd be a good grant to
Well,
get.
there are some,
So
they're not trails, but for example,
kind of,
there's a,
It's all forest.
I don't want to complicate this, but right here, there's a V.
yeah,
And this is a nice gravel road.
yeah,
But we can't, this guy.
Well, the good
this
thing-
guy wants out, he wants us to extinguish that, right? So, but there is a road, for lack of a better word, that exists right up through here.
right,
And it comes up way up in here, and then there's one that goes this way, one that goes that way. And so I don't know that we would necessarily have to start a new.
so there are trails and there's trails.
Right.
The best thing to think about when you think about trails is our good old main state roads. And you can tell the difference when you're driving on a road that was actually engineered. And you can tell the difference when you're driving on a road that used to be a cow path
It's just.
and they just paved it. Similar to trails, there are trails that are just a corridor through the woods. And there's a trail that's designed for sustainability and the primary use desired.
Is it worth looking into environmental consulting firm to help develop a plan for such a large piece of land?
Regardless of the project, the funding source you're using for the recreational amenities that want to be developed, I would recommend finding a landscape architect that has trail design experience to look at. So even though it's a lot of acreage, it's an interesting layout. And what you want to avoid doing at the outset is making design and development decisions that don't accommodate potential future uses and expansion. So you don't want to, for example, put in a parking lot over here
Yeah.
when actually all of the use is going to be over there and you really wanted to be over there, or you know, the trailhead. This makes sense too frequently.
Plan ahead, right?
Plan ahead. Too frequently, parks are developed because land was available. And then, you know, the closest place for the parking lot and the cheapest way to develop it was where the parking lot went. And it doesn't make any sense in the grand scheme of servicing the capacity for that park tomorrow and in the future. So the investment in somebody like that. There's a couple of trail design firms that could also do it, but in my mind, when you're looking at this potential and you are potentially developing 250 to 300 acre new park, you want to go through a process involving the community. You know, what are their needs, what are their desires, what are the uses you want to encourage, what are the uses you want to discourage, and all of that then feeds into a design plan that will have a budget associated with it, that then feeds into your grant application that can help you. All of that work makes your grant application more fundable. You know, makes your project more fundable. The score higher and all of that good stuff.
Is there any planning money available for this?
Maybe. So
Because we're actually supposed to be looking for some grants that would help reduce what the town has to pay for what we've already committed.
right.
Never mind spending more.
So planning money is the biggest problem in currently in outdoor recreation facility development nationally.
That's true with everything.
Yeah, planning is tough because, you know, historically, everybody wanted to plan something and every town office in the state of Maine has a shelf groaning with plans that were never developed. So it's understandable why there's some apprehension about funding plans. But there's two things that I'll plant some seeds for you. The first seed is an imminent seed. And if you haven't acted on already, you might want to learn more about by going. So there's a, and this is like, I think this is the last week, it's either going to happen or not going to happen. But I don't know if you've heard about the Main Trails Bond. So Main Trails Bond. So there is LB 1164, I think. Don't quote me on that, it might be 54, but it's close enough. But if you just do an internet search for Main Trails Bond, it'll probably bring you to the NRCM website. And there is currently an initiative to get a $30 million bond passed that we would then vote on in the fall. That would give $7.5 million a year for the next 4 years for trail development. And a portion of that, up to 3% of annual apportionment for that fund is for trail planning. So a lot of what you could do could be funded, the design and engineering could be funded through the state trail.
If it passes.
If it's got to get out of the legislature.
Yeah, that's gonna happen in a few days.
It's like tomorrow's the last day.
Yeah.
Probably.
And they have to fund it.
No,
Well,
no.
there's two things they're debating. One is with the, so there's an apprehension on the part of legislators who have not gone through the bonding process. And they're looking at the increased cost for borrowing. And they're saying, why would we do that? Especially when there's a budget surplus. But everybody's after the budget surplus. Some thoughts are that there are rookie legislators who it wouldn't be a bad idea to go through the bonding process and educate them about how these things can work and how they can be good for the state. That debate's been going on. There's others who are in favor of the grant or the project who are saying, let's just take, you know, a portion of the surplus and fund it through the regular general.
Well, there's almost money in the local communities too.
Right, you know,
It's got some nice parts to it.
the remarkable thing about the Trails Bond project so far is that it's gotten an enormous number of supporters across the state. Everybody from Middle being on down, you know, communities across the state, everybody loves trails. And everybody that is working on trails knows that there's not enough money for trails. So it's enormously popular. And you know, it's coming down to the wire.
And what about the maintenance?
The who?
The maintenance,
Maintenance, so the RTP grant, there was a time before I took over the program, this is a pat on my back. I'm glad this is being recorded. The RTP program, of course, we didn't have as much money, but for the first, RTP started in 91, I took over this job in 2014, in, I think, 2016. So whoever's good at math can figure out how long that was. But we funded only development of trails. And then, and no maintenance, thinking that the maintenance is that's on you. You can get a grant, we'll help you build it, but you gotta maintain it, right? Reasonable obligation. Nobody maintains things, you know, they think they're relying, our outdoor recreation infrastructure in Maine is relying upon volunteers. And the volunteer population is declining.
We know that.
So, you know, so we had a program that would help you fund a project, build a trail, and then would wait in the wings until it fell apart. And then you'd apply for a renovation grant to build it back up, which didn't seem to make much sense. So we added maintenance as an eligible. And this, you know, this is not going out in the spring, picking up blowdowns and things like that. It's more than general maintenance, but it's still maintenance. If the trail bond passes, I'll be managing that, and we're modeling it on the RTP program. So it'll be similar to, there will be maintenance funding available there.
So that has to pass the legislature, and then it's gonna pass the voters.
Unless they put it right into the
Right,
budget.
and then that's gonna pass the voters in November.
If they just put it as, if they just allocate general fund monies, you know,
Right,
money out of the coffers, that's available right away.
understood, but
But if it's a.
But if it's a bond,
it's a
then
two-step.
really, we're not looking at money for the program.
Right.
I wouldn't be up and running on that program until 2020.
Yeah, which is,
Still within the time.
And the other thing, how many of you are hunters? Anybody? And you know, so you know what Pittman-Robertson Act is. And you know that in the early 20s and 30s, every hunter across the country was concerned with the depletion of game. You know, deer population, it's hard to imagine today, but Canada goose was down to like 20,000 Canada geese. You know, deer, white-tailed deer, 100,000 in North America, things like that were crazy. So they petitioned the federal government to add a tax on the sale of ammunition and firearms, 11% tax. Nobody's done that since, but since they've done that, Pittman-Robertson Act has put more money into wildlife conservation and protection than any other program combined. You know, it's done more for conservation. Most people wouldn't think that. We need, I believe, we need the equivalent of the Pittman-Robertson Act for outdoor recreation infrastructure. So we should be, in my small mind, be petitioning our state and federal governments to add a small tax on the sale of recreation equipment. And then that can fund something similar to Pittman-Robertson, which then could be used for acquisition and development of outdoor recreation areas and care and maintenance of outdoor recreation areas. Because, so you guys are all elected, right? And your terms are going to be up eventually.
we're elected.
You're elected, you're
Right. And somebody new is going to come in. What's the biggest problem with municipal projects? Is that changing of the guard. You've got new priorities, and you know, the tennis court this was funded, I don't know, back in the 70s, is that right? Somewhere, you know, and it looks great for a long time until it falls apart. And then suddenly all that lack of maintenance, not that you didn't maintain it, but suddenly the lack of maintenance catches up. And so and municipal budgets are squeaky thin, and there are other priorities that always outcompete public outdoor recreation, which is a crime, because public outdoor recreation, in my mind, is an essential service. You know, it's economic development, it's health, it's livability, it attracts people to community, it keeps them here, it brings business in. It's a priority, but it hasn't. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay, I want to step into the crack you opened about money for wildlife. That's another important factor in the mind of Jeff Smith in particular. It's not just, we have been talking recreation and people and trails and toilets and parking lots. He wants a big a big focus of his and why he wants this in preservation is for wildlife habitat. And we need to balance our desire to put trails all over the place with that.
Right, so, so the answer to that is that, going back to a knowledgeable person to design the infrastructure so that it's not, the trail development is not a detriment to the wildlife habitat. And one of the primary recreational uses you would be arguing for within this area is wildlife observation. You know,
Absolutely.
bird watching
Right.
and, you know,
Yeah, I don't know where you came up with everybody wants to put trails all over the place, because I
Yeah,
certainly
you know,
don't.
I just.
Because number one, I think they're incredibly expensive.
Right,
I mean, I envision. Personally, I envision the least impact, and that's why I mentioned, you know, kind of piggybacking on the existing wood structure.
no, I'm fine with that, it's just that the tone is up until,
Well,
up until you mentioned Pittman, whatever.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a single mention of wildlife in this entire talk, and I just
Sure.
wanted to be sure they're in the picture.
And just the trees as well, so I mean, we had the foresters come and, you know, like, finding the invasive species, trying to take care of that as well, so. Yes, there are definitely two layers, the
Yeah.
environment and the recreation.
and the land water grant can be used for invasive species eradication.
Good.
So, whereas RTP grant, that would be difficult to, you'd have to tie the invasive eradication to the actual trail development, so they would have to be really close, but land and water could say, you know, we've got bittersweet throughout this 300 acres, and a portion of the grant is going to go in and eradicate the bittersweet. And I would argue that you should then contact the Maine Conservation Corps to have a crew of volunteer members down here doing that.
Yeah.
Invasive species eradication.
Right.
Henry, go ahead.
I got another place I can be at 5 o'clock. I just make sure I'm clear on something. The reason that the timing is an issue on grants is you're trying to not use tax money to buy it in the first place, right? You're trying to defray the cost of the tax.
Well, I
by
think we
grant.
told people that.
Oh, no, that's what I'm just trying to make sure you understand. So that's the problem with the timing. Now,
The other part is the leverage.
yes,
That the donated portion of it can bias and match.
Let's talk about another timing issue.
so it came up tonight, is that on at least one form of grant, there's a 2-year window.
So that's where I'm going with this.
Right, but if the selectman's position being that 2 years better work, because you have the opportunity to wait a while and run it through a grant. Is that where the problem lies with timing is?
No, I don't think so. I think the crux of the problem in my mind is, according to Doug, I didn't hear about this reach back until tonight.
Right.
Was that we can't spend the money until we have the grant, and I know how long.
And
it
I
took.
wouldn't count on that reach back thing.
Right, okay, and I know how long it took to process this little $30,000 grant. Out here, it took forever to get it through the Fed, literally, it seemed like forever to get it through the Feds. And I know the clients don't want to wait that long, I mean, they would like to close next week. If
Right.
But Jeff, we might be able to work with.
So for all intents and purposes, because of what they did at town meeting, you could just buy the Klein property tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're trying to
Well,
reduce the cost to the taxpayer.
Correct.
All right.
yeah, I mean, I guess the way I look at it is I'm looking at it as a whole, and the client is, in my mind, is a different animal. It's, you know.
Right.
I know.
Huh?
I mean, you know, we try to talk about the numbers, and if we look at the $67,000 of the purchase cost, I mean, the best case scenario would be we can match half of that with land for Maine's future, you know, so that brings down, you know, 37, 36 or whatever. Then, you know, if the town could commit to put the Klein money in, I mean, it gives us time to raise money from the local population and then, you know, find other forms of donation. But at some point, somebody's got to take a chance and put some money in the pot. And
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from this is I think that to be able to use grant money to purchase is a timing issue. But I think the appraised value, the donated portion would still be eligible as leverage for what we've got in the pot, right? Is it?
It-
Or part of the match?
Again, it gets to be a timing issue in an ideal world. No part of the project would be transacted and until
After
the local project sponsor had a fully executed project agreement.
You're talking about one specific grant now, not the land for Maine's future necessarily. or-
LMF still won't let you buy the land until you have a project agreement.
Yeah.
with
I
them.
mean, typically, that's the
So
way.
even leverage to. I mean,
Well, I'm not an expert in
Right.
LMF.
Yeah.
But the ones that I've seen recently have not involved the use of an acquisition within, what it was, a 2-year window,
Yeah,
prior to as part of a match component. So if they can do that, that's great, because that really,
that's what we stated clearly, I mean, I read it, yeah, in the. And I think Jeff Smith would be willing to work with us and wait, I mean, we already talked to him about that grant process. So I think he's a very good partner to have, because he is totally in agreement with us to develop a proposal of what would be achieved for the land, and willing to get, wait at least a year or two to get the money.
Well, that makes things easier, because we haven't had an indication from him about that.
I have some.
But we have.
No, we haven't asked him, right,
Yeah.
but that makes it easier. The clients are the exact opposite,
Yeah.
and I had to, whoa, wait a minute.
That's what I'm saying, we need to take a first step.
Well, that's why, and I also think if we go ahead and buy the Klein property with the surplus, that shows a commitment on the town's part too, that we're into this.
Yes.
It strikes me too, that is if the grant application is being looked at and they look at the map, the town owns this land, and then there's this land that they, want to work on, and then there's this little 10 acres that the town owns. It's just another argument that was co-joining into a single.
Yeah,
grant.
that it was a grand plan.
Yeah.
And it does about,
Yes,
yes, nicely to our property.
Arches into the
Yes.
continuous.
continuousness.
And 1 acre is
Within.
surrounded by Smith.
Right.
But
Yeah.
clearly, this is where we're headed.
And,
Well-
it may, become a domino effect, who knows?
Well-
I want to make sure that everybody understands the land water conservation grant cycle. Because it stinks.
there is, first submission.
Well,
September to this to January, and then, you get, I think also we need to be sponsored by an agency.
that's LMF.
Yeah.
So their cycle is onerous. It's not as onerous as LWC. And Bureau of Parks and Lands would sponsor this project. So, when you're thinking of LMF for this, think BPL.
And which is the pool of money that when you get $1, it puts basically a covenant on the property?
Both will. LMF will require a conservation easement.
Right.
The basic difference between LMF and LWCF. Couple. LMF is state money. LWCF is federal.
Okay.
So the money for Land and Water Conservation Fund comes from oil and gas lease revenues in the Gulf of Mexico. That back in the 60s, Congress decided, well, we're extracting all this that's public resource. Let's give some of it back to the public. And this program was developed. I know. Imagine that. The LMF will require a conservation easement, but there is an out on the LMF side that says basically the town could sell the land, and then the town is obligated to pay back the money that LMF gave to acquire the land.
Right.
Land and Water Conservation, you can't do that. The Land and Water Conservation Fund says, in theory, you could sell the land, but you're going to regret it because you can't. There's no giving anything back. If you sell the land, then a conversion is created. And a conversion is basically the process of replacing the land. So whenever that land is sold, you have to do a Yellow Book level appraisal of the value of that land in the current environment. And because it was in conservation, the Yellow Book appraisal would make the exceptional opinion that it is developable. So 10, 15, 20 years from now, that land's gonna be worth a chunk of change. And then that sets the floor for the acquisition of the replacement land.
Correct.
So then you have to buy new land, and that is equal to or greater in value than the original at that time in the future.
Right.
And then you have to develop the recreation amenities that are equal to or greater in value that is on the site at the time. So
You have to move usage. You have to recreate the same usage.
basically, you're recreating the same or equivalent or better of the park that you just sold.
Yeah.
And
And that's the process that you said we perhaps if we went this route, we could unencumber this out here on the street.
Right.
And because we're gonna encumber so much backland.
right,
So,
so right, that's potentially.
which I think might be a wise thing to do.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I do have to leave. I got a meeting at 5 o'clock. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
But it strikes me, I never did get the answer to my very first question when you gave us the ballpark on the appraisal, whether it was that for both.
If it's-
the yellow book and the review, I don't even remember the number.
The Yellow Book and the review should be combined.
Okay.
15 to 20,000 these days. It wasn't.
And that's if we appraise all those parcels or just the 3 Smith parcels together or?
That's
you do it at the same time.
right.
I mean,
It would have to
today,
be done within 12 months to be valid. As long as they're done within 12 months,
problems of what?
12 months of each other. So if you have, there's multiple parcels involved.
But we could create the Smith parcel into one.
Right. Depending on
Actually,
the,
we could create them all. into
so
one.
hypothetically, if you also included part of the town lot and had that appraised, you were doing the Smith parcel this summer. And then, my thoughts stayed in your head and you said, well, let's do that too. And you did an appraisal then, as long as that's within 12 months of the Smith appraisal.
What of the town?
Of the town parcel, or whatever portion of the town parcel you wanted to include in a land and water grant. As long as those are within 12 months of each other, then they're eligible for a certain reasonable amount of time. There's no definition of reason. So I like to think that reasonable is the 2-year cycle that it would take to begin from beginning of planning to the actual receipt of a project agreement. The National Park Service has a different definition of reason sometimes. So but that's always good. You wouldn't be able to, we'd never get by with, the Smith appraisal was done in August of 23 and Thomaston appraisal was done in August of 25. That'll never shake out.
Yeah, and you wanted to talk to us about the cycle.
So the cycle, it's important to understand the grant cycle now as it exists, and I've learned my lesson. So I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'm going to give you the more likely reality code. And that is that in order to apply for land and water in the next grant cycle, which is the end of June 2024, you need to request a pre-application site inspection this year. By the end of the calendar year. You can do it anytime between now and the end of December, and you probably should do it sooner than later if this is something you want to do. It doesn't bind you to submitting an application, it just opens that door. And that's a simple process, but required by the Park Service. Sending me or my trustee sidekick Matt down to take a look at the property and make sure it's reasonably eligible.
Well, we were already gonna do that on the tennis court.
Right. Well, that one's easy.
Right.
Because we've been there, done that, but we'd have to come out and take a look at the Smith parcel.
Yeah, understood. If we wanna make that next application more than just a tennis court,
Right.
then we need to.
Or if you want, just, you're gonna leave that alone. And talk about this as land and water. You want to do the pre-approval. Then the application is the end of June 2024. And then here's the gloomy part. You can expect a project agreement by October 1st of 25.
This is what I'm telling you.
It's really shouldn't be that bad. And so part of the reason I'm giving you the gloom and doom is that I ordinarily would give a much rosier picture, which I think encourages people to apply. But the Park Service is under the resource, and they've been hiring new staff. They've been authorized by Congress to hire up to 70 new staff for this program, but they're not there yet. So I'm tired of telling people that you should get a project agreement by March 1st of the year after applying, and then not being able to deliver on that. So I'd rather you be thinking October, and then I give you a surprise. Hey, it's June 1st, you got your grant.
Sonia, we really shouldn't do that. This is a public
And then-
meeting.
Oh, it was.
I know, but it's a public meeting. I think we should ask her to talk somewhere else.
So that's, that's where timing becomes an issue with your prospective partners and their thoughts of how quickly they want to sell or need to sell.
Well, back to the client, that's absolutely not gonna work.
Not going to. Smith. Same way.
I think we got.
But,
So the other thing to call your local legislator right away for the trail bond is that the trail bond is acquisition and development as well. And the acquisition strings attached will be more similar to LMF in that
But
it's
we need a
conservation
whole
needs.
budget to apply for that, like including. So you see, to me, it's a catch-22. If we apply for a grant, we need to know how much we need. To know how much we need a plan of what's going to be developed. And to know what's going to be developed, we need to have
It is a catch-22, and it's a terrible thing. The only thing I'll say, the only additional thing, maybe I'll say, is that the costs incurred for design and engineering for land and water project are eligible for use as match or reimbursement up to 3 years, within 3 years prior to receipt of a fully executed project agreement. So with RTP, it's tighter. RTP design and engineering costs incurred in advance of an application are eligible only as match if they're incurred within 18 months of a project agreement. But the RTP program is a lot nimbler, if that's a word. I don't know, but I'm going to use that one because the application for RTP is the end of September, and you will have a project agreement by the March 1st of the following spring.
and is that federal?
That is also federal, but it's federal highway,
Not Park Service.
not Park Service, and it's remarkable dealing with two different federal grant programs in the number and ways that they're dramatically different. Federal highway says, here's your money. Abide by the rules and manage it as you see fit.
Yeah.
Park Service says, here's your money, it's over here. In order to get it, you have to do all these things. And before we and so with RTP, your application comes to me. I have a little group that will review it and approve it, and you get your project. With land and water program, your application comes to me. I have a little group that will review it and approve it, but that just puts it to the next level. And then it gets submitted to the National Park Service for their review and approval. And they tear it apart, and there's a period. Generally speaking, once you've passed the state threshold, you'll get funding. But it's increasingly difficult to predict when. And it's unfortunate that I've had projects that have waited for 3 or 4 years that have been approved at the state level. And I have one unfortunate, excellent project, should be funded, but they just couldn't wait any longer. A small town in northern Maine, and they said, the heck with it. They didn't use that language, but they said we're walking away. So it's a problem that everybody is aware of. And honestly, Department of Interior is aware of how ineffective their National Park Service Land and Water Program is. And they're making dramatic efforts to improve it. But you know, this is like turning a battleship, right? It's gonna take time.
Not in the timing that is going to help us.
Right,
And then the LMF has their cycle, the only one that's not cycled is waterfront property, that they take them on a as it comes up basis, because they know that when something comes up, you don't grab it,
Right.
it's gone.
well, that's a little more nimble, but they have their process.
Yeah, well,
Um,
they have their cycles, submission dates.
Right.
Right, I don't know when the next one is, but. Hmm?
now you could. I don't know. No, never mind. I'm not gonna say that, because I don't think you can.
Real quick on the appraisal, the two appraisals. Do you have to go to approved appraisers, or can you just get any appraiser?
Can't be any appraisals. And so there is speaking of diminishing resources, like volunteers, there's a diminishing supply of appraisers in the state that are certified at the Yellow Book level. And Yellow Book, it's USAFLUA, something like that, is the actual name of the level of appraisal. But they call it a Yellow Book because when it was first created, it was bound in a yellow binder, a yellow book. So it's easier to just say yellow. I can provide a list of known Yellow Book appraisers. It's a really short list, and then the reviewers have to know what they're doing too. And if you're going
They
down
don't have
that
to be on
road,
that, they don't have to be from that list.
they also have to be Yellow Book level. They have to be able to perform a Yellow Book appraisal in order to tell whether the appraiser you got is doing it right.
Are they both basically the same list of people?
Same list of people.
Yeah.
So it's gonna depend on availability. You know, one person may be swamped with appraisals but would be able to fit a review in, or vice versa. So.
This is all subject to public bidding, I'm assuming, if you want to.
No, you're doing it in advance, so you follow your own.
Can you get reimbursed for it, even though it's?
Absolutely,
But
Oh.
when do we get reimbursed?
not until you get a grant.
Right, so.
If and when you get.
If.
Exactly.
Oh,
I'm just
yeah.
wondering, is there, you kind of have a picture of project we have in mind. And there are, depending on which grant we're going for, or if we're going for several of them for different bits. All of these hoops, each barrier we get over costs money.
Yep.
Have you got any idea of, basically, we're at the planning stage at the application. How much does it typically cost upfront just to get our application on their desk?
My first response will be that you don't need to hire pros to do any of this. And you can submit an application just with you folks in this room for a land and water project for acquisition and development. So it's not that complicated that you need doctoral degree people coming in, or, you know, you can do it. And in that case, you would build into your budget the cost then of design and engineering post award. So, but then you have the hard part of that kind of process is that it's more difficult to describe in actual terms the public use and access of the park that's going to be developed.
How do you do a budget?
And that's the other part.
I mean, that was the
It's all
problem initially
guesswork.
here, is they didn't put a solid budget together,
Right.
and partially, and then also.
And then
COVID
budgets
prices
blew up.
Blew up, but I mean,
So you can do it that way, but you're gonna want to recruit some local talent that has, you know, design and engineering background. Thank you for that.
is there, can I ask a simple question, just.
Well, just what happens if you do a homegrown application and you don't get the people with local background, is you're throwing darts at a board for numbers. And the people reviewing the application are people that are experienced with acquisition development projects. So they know what real budgets look like, and they know what, and the biggest failure of that is that people are either asking for, so the land and water grant, you can ask for up to $500,000, so $1 million project. So a lot of people will just say, well, we can ask for it, let's ask for it. And then, you know, their budgets and their project development is like, you don't need half of that. And the other failure is that, the other failure is relying on volunteers to do all your work. And you're used to that kind of project development, so you're not asking for nearly enough. And those both will.
We have a land
State
trust in our backyard, the George River Land Trust, that they are obviously very experienced at developing trail and purchasing land, and they have expressed, interest in helping us with that project, but
So they've received RTP grants before. So.
So. It sounds like to simplify this though, and unless there's some prohibition on this. We could apply for a grant that was simply acquisition, well. Tenant.
It's funny you should say that.
I'm thinking you could combine the tennis court and the acquisition, right? And maybe. The unencumbering of this piece and kind of get that out of the way. And that gets. We deal with Smith and he gets paid and blah, 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 right? And then we take the next.
Then you, right,
Just
plan
take
on,
a lot.
We deal with Klein.
I think Klein, we either deal with an hour or that's. I think that's off the table. Really difficult.
No, I.
yeah, for a grant related project.
Yeah, if we can somehow keep the fact that we paid for it and use that as some reach back match, great, but
Right.
short of that, I think.
But then I didn't talk to Jeff Smith, and
Right.
I was very open to
yes.
whenever the actual sale
Right.
fits the timetable for
Well,
grants.
and you
yes,
just heard
we'll
that,
go for
that could take a year, and I don't know what the.
Yeah, you should say,
Simultaneous, we could apply to LMF and see, I mean.
either way, somebody should talk to Mr. Smith and say,
Yes, I mean.
can you wait until 2025?
Yeah, and we can invite him to some of our meetings for the Conservation Commission, and he can help us, put the details in, but.
Well, we could even do a purchase and sale agreement with it.
So technically, you're not supposed to have a PSA in place
Okay.
before you apply.
I man, they like,
I already knew the answer to that.
they like to put a minute like
I
this.
tell you, it's hard. So we're working on it. So what?
That's just.
There's,
Yeah.
I could bore you until Monday.
We need to know all these details so that we don't get killed on the technicality.
Oh, I know. That's why I was glad to Doug off to come down, and I assume this is all in writing somewhere.
Well, what I'll do is, it may not be till I'm back from vacation, but I will do a transcript of this
I
entire.
can do that over vacation. Where's your dedication?
Well, that would be very helpful.
Yes, I will do that, but it's not gonna happen before.
Yeah, no, I
get
know.
a claim on it.
But it sounds like to me, the first thing we need to do is find some source, some way to raise money for appraisal.
I agree.
Whether that's local donation.
Yeah,
It sounds like we can't
Well-
go anywhere without.
well, that's the
LMF
thing,
is-
we need to raise money, and, after listening to all this, it's like. When we need to devise a plan on how to do that, and then, all the things we need to include so that, the money is raised but not tied into a specific purpose, but explain all the things that are going to require money and, so that, again, we don't say, people say, oh, I gave that to purchase the land, but what we needed is for the appraisal, so.
Well, that's why I was thinking specifically trying to raise some money locally for appraisal. It'd be very clear that.
But at the town meeting, we said we would raise money for the purchase, so.
Well, this is connected with.
Yeah, but-
it's-
Part of it, part of it, you can't apply for LMF without. it, right? I mean,
Right, I was
so,
gonna say, they'll need one
I think
too.
that's part of it.
I don't think they require a yellow book, but they're not going to prohibit the
Yeah.
yellow book. So if you go yellow book, then You've got the proverbial two birds with one stone.
And if you're right, that yellow book will be much higher than, I mean, certainly than assessment. And we can count it as match, the part that's
You
donated.
can't, well, right, the value of the land, you can count as match. You can't count as match the cost of the appraisal.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying the value, which will be higher by under
Right.
yellow book, counts as something
Right.
that goes toward match. That it could even pay for itself in terms of the additional match we get out of it.
But then we got just the local problem. I mean, here we are, we're gonna, we're gonna. Once we get through this grant, we were hoping to apply for that and hoping to, solicit donations to rebuild that tennis court. We're talking about Guilford Butler, we're talking, I mean, we're competing with ourselves.
That's true. I think the appraisals are a priority.
Yeah, we can't do much with that.
And depending on what our symbols look like, which I haven't got included. I'd be inclined to just press forward with that.
Is
I'd
there,
like to be-
where can we get the list of appraisers that are,
If you ask nicely, I'd be happy to send it.
thank you.
Just send an email and remind me that I
Well,
promised.
why
to
don't
send
you-
it.
it would be nice if everything could go through Terry,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because she's sort of the,
It's
and that way,
in the notes.
she's sort of the center, that way we don't know that this one.
Send me a quick note saying appraisals, please.
And then
Preserve.
you don't have 6 people asking you for the thing.
Well, even if that happened, I narrow it down to one.
It almost sounds like too, we need, the Conservation Commission and the Select Board needs to sit down and have just sort of a brainstorming session.
Yeah, we need to set up a timeline.
I mean, well, not only a timeline, but what we want to look at, I mean, I don't think we want to have our trails going by the salt shed and the stump dump. Well, we can't have it over the stump dump. We have to limit access. to
No,
that. So
it
that-
will, where the gates are, they are beyond all that.
But you gotta get to the gate. So,
I'm going to prove the point that when I leave a meeting, people are crazy confused. Is there public access to the land parcel?
we don't know, we don't think so.
We do not.
There's no
Physical
physical
access.
access, for sure.
Physical
And
access.
part of why they were so eager to sell that they didn't even want to do the research to see if there was a right of way to it. So, but I think it's.
Which is why they got us a deal for if the town would buy it. Because they knew they wouldn't be able to sell it on the open market, even to the neighbors.
But because it's adjacent to the town parcel, so here's what I'm thinking. In the grand scheme of things, this little park up here doesn't make much sense to be permanently encumbered by landwater conservation fund. And
The tennis basketball
tennis-
court and this.
tennis basketball, right, it's a little pocket park that is probably going to be a thorn in the side of the town in terms of additional town infrastructure needs in the future. So where I'm going is, why don't we in the midst of closing out a land and water project that just improved the site, convert that site and remove the land and water encumbrance on that site and use the Klein property as the replacement value.
But then we couldn't get a grant to fix the tennis court.
Well, who says that that's the best place for the tennis court?
Well, we're building a parking lot.
I know.
It's right.
But
Yeah, I mean,
forever is a long time.
I understand. But I don't like that. At all. I mean, we raised donations.
I know. That doesn't mean this park closes. Just means that there's no land and water encumbrance.
But how are we gonna rebuild the tennis court? We have hard enough time getting to 50%.
USTA,
US,
United States Tennis Association, has got grants for.
you got them checking your wallet?
No, so you want to check with Eric.
What, I don't think that's a bad idea in the long run, because I think we probably could, my personal feeling is we could reduce it to 1 court.
So the other thing to tap into is the pickleball frenzy.
Well, we are, I mean, it would be a combo pickleball.
Right,
Right.
but I think the mid-coast pickleball community is aggressive and growing. Hopefully, there's a few pickleball players here, but aggressive meaning they want to make sure that there are resources for their desired form of recreation.
Want to paint the basketball court.
That's
Right. So outside of the grant program, there might be funding. Anyway, so the benefits, this is all, I'm gonna leave here and you guys are gonna kick all these ideas around. But in theory, perpetual is a long time, is where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
And you've got public works infrastructure in and around this little pocket park that might impede the future needs of the community in terms of public infrastructure. Police, fire, public works, who knows what. You have an opportunity to convert that with this parcel acquisition, if and only if well, you already had public meeting on this to acquire the land. There wasn't any language in that relative to using that for any particular purpose, was there?
not for the line.
The line is just town's gonna buy it.
Right.
So that-
At whatever we come up with.
Right.
Whatever restrictions.
So that's good. That leaves the door open. If the town was gonna buy that land and there was anything in the language that said, we're gonna buy that land, and we're gonna turn it into a park. Or we're gonna put trails on it, we're gonna do anything like that, then we wouldn't be able to do this. But because this is a blank slate acquisition, any potential future use is available. 10 acres is more than, I think we've got 1.5 acres out here, maybe. Probably the appraised value would work out, there'd still be appraisals, but you could swap that out, move that down. And then in the future, you would have one large contiguous land and water protected parcel instead of this little one over here and a large one over
And now
there.
we're talking 3 appraisals.
Well, over time,
But where would the tennis court go?
you can leave it right there.
Okay.
It's just we can't get the grant for it. So now instead of raising 50,000, I gotta raise 100,000,
The advantage is it's unencumbered,
but it's not encumbered.
not just that, but the area.
That whole area that is free.
Yeah, if we were gonna expand this building,
But we just,
we would have.
they're gonna let us unencumber that, even though you guys just spent money on it.
Because we're
But
trading.
I know.
Yeah,
But it's
because,
just.
well, in that argument, you would say that, well, the town is just under, you're not gonna fit it. But you would make an argument essentially that, we've come to realize that, you're growing leaps and bounds in this community. And the future needs of the community are going to be, inevitably, you're gonna need a new town office or public works building, or police and fire building. And it's never cheaper to renovate an existing structure. It's always cheaper to build a new structure. So you're gonna build a new one across the street where the park is, and this becomes public open space in front of the municipal building. And then the replacement value is here, and it's contiguous with the vision for a future park. So it makes a lot of sense in terms of long-term planning. And then you've got all the backcountry here. You could do it. None of this backcountry is used for outdoor recreation, right?
Well, yeah.
Well, but formally, the town's not
Right.
saying this is a park.
No,
So in theory, even though this is already publicly owned. No, okay, I'm gonna scratch that. You can't do that. You didn't, Ralph Klein is your option for that. Maybe even this 1 acre parcel that's closer to the kind of front country could be replacement value. So it's worth at least kicking it around. I understand your short-term need resistance to that thought.
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Well, I don't know, it's just so many people have put so much effort
I know.
into this, and now all of a sudden it feels like it's just getting kicked on the back.
well, we're already. I guess the question to the community is, you're not gonna have another grant for this project until 2025.
Right, and we knew that.
So, does everybody want to wait for the renovation of the tennis court for another 2 years? That's before you have the grant. The work's not gonna get done until 26.
I think everybody knew it was a long-term project, and that's why the plan was to keep the one that's in fairly good shape.
Right.
Patched up and usable, and it's being used, just
Right.
people playing pickleball 2 days a week, it wasn't that. And that's why, I mean, I felt like we had a pretty good plan in place, and
Oh, we
now
still
I feel
do.
like we're,
That doesn't go away.
okay,
I'm just offering alternatives and options.
Yeah.
So that I like to leave a place.
confused.
I'm not confused, but I want to leave everybody else confused. So that you understand what the opportunities and risks and processes look like. So that you can make a good decision about which direction you want to go and what you want to approach and when you want to approach it. I wouldn't be doing my job well if I didn't reveal all of what could
Yeah,
happen.
no, that's fine.
Some of it could not make sense. Some of it, after you sleep on it, we're like, well, you know. So it's worth looking at the USTA and their grant program. They don't like pickleball, funny. The association doesn't like pickleball.
So they're not gonna endorse a combo for it.
We don't have to tell them that. It's just lines on the pavement right now.
I'm not good at that.
That's not on record, right? We're gonna redact that.
No.
And there might be, that's the only one I'm aware of for tennis.
Well, we've probably gone on long enough, and you gotta get back, you gotta drive.
Yeah, let you talk.
It's been, well, before we leave, just one further quick question, if should be a simple yes or no. We don't, I assume that the trails don't have to all be accessible and non-accessible, it can be a combination.
You can be whatever you want.
Right, I mean, you could have a half a mile of accessible trails or a mile and a mile of just a pathway.
So the answer is yes.
That's all I need.
It's ridiculous.
Yes, go ahead. You wanna expand, go ahead.
There's a benefit in developing multiple types of trails. So accessible trails are good for access to a great broad portion of your community. Those accessible trails should then be developed closer to wherever the trailhead is and the parking lot. And they should include some, some unique natural amenities that make it a pleasant walk.
Yeah.
But you're not going to want to develop anything more than a mile of an accessible trail. That's going to be expensive enough. And that's about, this is a broad generalization, but that's about as much as the accessible trail and community would probably want. It's
Because that's 2 miles, really.
it's 2 miles if you do an out and back, or, if you do it, if you get a nice design for it, and there's little loops and, it can be more than that, but you're actually designing and developing one.
Right.
But then you've got a lot of other land here that would be suitable for mountain bikes. And, again, that's an increasing, need and desire in Mid-Coast Maine. So right up the road in Camden, lots of mountain bikers, this
Not
will
only
be.
bikes.
Bicycles
Bicycles.
with fat tires.
Well, I just don't know what Jeff means by.
Well, it doesn't have to be on jets,
Similar-
doesn't have to be on jets. Actually, I don't think he knows, because I wrote it.
So,
I'm the one who wrote similar.
well, and there are ways to design. So that basically you want a variety of trails,
Okay,
because there's a lot of opportunity here. It would be boring to have just one trail type and user group. And the other thing The other thing to keep in mind, if you're thinking of trails, is to find somebody that can help you identify the redeeming qualities of that local environment and those habitats.
Yeah.
So that the trails can take you to them, but don't destroy them.
Yeah.
You know, so trails can be, everybody thinks trails are innocuous because they're in the woods, like, you know, there's no harm, it's just a trail. But it's really a little road that bisects habitats that increases predation from crows and blue jays on songbirds in the forest. So there's implications. So you want to have them designed well.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, I'm glad you're saying this, because I've been trying to look at various firms able to do these things, and it goes from foresters only interested in the trees and the natural
Right.
components. And then, others are just the trails and entertainment and the ups and downs and turnarounds and so forth. But, we need somebody can do both.
You need somebody that specializes in trail. So you want to look at the Professional Trail Builders Association, PTBA. Maine is fortunate in that we have two leaders of PTBA in the state of Maine as professional trail builders. And then you want to also look at, there used to be a Maine Association of Landscape Architects, but they've since have merged with Massachusetts or New England Regional Association of Landscape Architects, but they're supposedly developing a Maine page. And within that group, you should look for landscape architects that do this kind of work. There's a wide range, as you know, of landscape architect. There's those who design rose gardens, and then there's people who design trails. You want the trail.
Have you heard of Stantec Corporation?
Stantec's pretty good. They're engineers. They do have a landscape architect who's really good on, in their corral, at least one. Did you want to, are there any engineers in the building? Nothing against engineers, but they're linear. They think linear. And their trail is going to be from point A to point B. Instead of reading the landscape and, and looking at the habitats and what do people enjoy.
Yes, and Stantec's got they're a huge
I know.
multinational corporation. And they've got to reach back for just about every kind of expertise you can go.
Yeah.
Including
There are other large scale A&E firms in Maine that have landscape architect. The difference, though, I think you'll find is that those A&E firms have landscape architects that are engaged in kind of prettying up a municipal engineering project. So you've got a new boat launch or a new waterfront, and they're doing the park. Doesn't mean they can't do this other stuff, but you want to try as much as possible to find somebody that is very trail focused.
Okay, so
All right,
we're at the 5:30, so do we want to? I realize there's only 3 members here, but do we want to try to pick a date or two when the 2 groups can get together? Yeah, I think that's an idea. I mean, but if we don't keep stuff moving, it doesn't keep moving, so.
Maybe take one of our meetings.
Thank you.
You need me anymore?
Thank you.
You know how to get me?
Oh, yeah.
Call, email, actually email, calling, and I can have it.
Yeah, but I appreciate if everybody would work through Terry, so we get it.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
enjoy your vacation and the work that comes after it. That's where I am now.
So the parking lot starts tomorrow, the equipment's out there, and so we'll be ready to close that out.
Can I go out here?
Yeah.
So I can-
The other
Won't be an alarm?
the basketball's all paved and the fence is back up. Thanks to a few volunteers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
So
The 9th of
August
August.
9th is our meeting and want to combine
I mean, why not?
You guys want to have your regular meeting at 5, you're usually done by 6, and then,
it.
because this conversation sounds like it could ramble on for a long time. And then,
And I think we just, let's just pick the time now. Say that it will be,
Why can't that be our agenda?
that could be the
Yeah, the main
main,
meeting.
and If there's any other business that can't wait, we'll.
Well, it'll be, how about if you guys meet at 5 and then we can convene at 5:30 or something?
Even
You want-
if we have the whole meeting together, because I don't think we have anything on the back burner besides that.
Huh? Oh, it's not cool.
Good, and just the other way around, if there's something, we can meet with the select board first, and then
5,
anything we have to do, we can meet after,
okay, I can do 5.
like 5 o'clock.
So joint.
No,
Mary, I feel like we're imposing on you. I don't know if you can, I mean, if you.
I can't even think ahead till August 9th, so I'm sure I'll find.
I mean, you're certainly welcome to attend, but if you just want to come and get that going.
No, I think it's important that I know what's going on.
Well, yeah, but I know,
We have a good note taker. We have Linda Garrett, who takes our notes, so it's like.
Good is
so,
an understatement.
yeah, good is an understatement, right?
Well, as long as you make sure that it gets recorded and we don't screw that up, then you could just watch it later if you can't come.
Sure.
5, so we're talking 5 p.m. August 1?
August
Nine.
9, yeah.
So is there a motion to adjourn? So we. Without further, if there's no objection, we're adjourned. That was. Wow.
Yeah.
Huh? It was.
So,
I think the purchase portion.
yeah, I think that's good. And I checked Beach Hill, in Rockport, was funded by Ellen.
Yeah, they got tons.
Yeah, and I will call the place I mentioned in Elsewhere to see if they might be willing to share their proposal. To see what it looked like, because their description is exactly what we're trying to.
You know, if they funded that project in Hope, I can't remember the name of it,
I
but
mean,
that's a really nice trail. It go around the mountain. And that has like plywood trail right off there.
I'm not-
See, the forester mentioned Stentic, saying they think.